Hello and welcome into the Dave Campbell's College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Carter Yates, and joining me from beautiful Austin, Texas, is senior college writer Mike Craven. Craven, we are recording this a little bit later in the week on a Wednesday morning. It means we have time to digest the CFP rankings that came out. What Texas teams do we have in the CFP rankings? Read them off for me.
So we got 3 in the top 10. We got Texas A&M at 3, Texas Tech at 6, which moved up a couple of spots from 8, and then Texas at 10 in front of Oklahoma, as we kind of discussed a couple of weeks ago when this thing was first coming out. So 3 in the top 10. I'd imagine North Texas is kind of hovering on the outside there. There's one G5 team ranked, and that's a South Florida team that beat them in Denton by 27. So I think that's good news for North Texas, though, because it means that the committee believes the top ranked team in the American is better than the top ranked team in the Sun Belt, which is James Madison. And in the AP poll, James Madison is the G5 team ranked because AP voters care more about win-loss records than they do who are the better teams. And so as it tracks right now, I think we for sure have one in. I think A&M, unless it collapses, Marcel Reed, breaks legs or, like barring something like that, I think Texas A&M is in. And what is good for Texas Tech is being at 6. If they can beat UCF, they can beat West Virginia. Let's say they end up at 5 going into conference championship week. I've long thought the only way Texas Tech gets in is as a Big 12 conference champion. If they are up at 6 or at 5 going into the December 6th or 7th, whenever that Big 12 championship game is, and they lose a close one, let's say in a rematch to BYU or a rematch to Utah in which they beat both of those teams, I don't think it's impossible that Texas Tech still stays in at like 11 or 12, similar to what happened to SMU last year.
It was huge that they jumped Ole Miss in the CFP rankings because both those teams have one loss. That's got to say something about what the CFP committee thinks about Texas Tech's roster, because it's not often you'll see a Big 12 team jump an SEC team with similar records.
Yeah, I think some of it is you can't use the eyeball test against Texas Tech in a way that sometimes you can against Big 12 teams. Like they clearly can line up in the hypothetical matchup with an SEC team because they're good along the lines of scrimmage. And then also, I think some of it is a admittance that the Ole Miss schedule stinks. And that they don't have a real their best win is Oklahoma, which is, a solid win, especially on the road by 8 points. But they beat a top 5 team in LSU, but that no longer looks good. You lose to Georgia. You got Florida, Mississippi State, South Carolina as your other SEC teams, Arkansas and Kentucky in there. So I think Texas Tech has a better resume, and kudos for the playoff committee for recognizing that and moving the Big 12 team above the SEC team.
That could be a correction with the Indiana debate from last year, because I know that conference alignment has made it to where Big 10 and SEC are both expanded so much where there's like 18 teams in each conference. And sometimes your schedule just misses all the best teams in your own conference. So I know everyone was up in arms last year about Indiana being in when they missed all the best teams. Could this be the committee, you think, saying, hey, we're correcting that wrong, and Ole Miss, we realize their schedule sucks?
I think so. And I also believe it's why Texas A&M has stayed at 3. If you look at the Aggies schedule, here are the top 7 teams in the SEC: A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma. Tennessee, you can add in there. A&M's not played one of them.
Yep.
They have not played any of those teams. They've played 4 teams that have already lost their head coach this year. So the schedule has broken well for A&M. The thing that's buoying the Aggies is the undefeated record in the SEC. If you're undefeated in the SEC on November 12th, you're going to be above all the other one-loss teams. And then also that road win against Notre Dame. And the committee keeps telling us what they think about Notre Dame. They are still in the top 10 at 9, right in front of Texas. So I think that's what's going for A&M here. What gets interesting is what the committee thinks about the Aggies if they lose a game, because you start digging into that schedule, and it's no fault of the Aggies. They play who's on the schedule, but they haven't played a lot of the top teams in the country outside of Notre Dame.
Did you agree with A&M being kept at number 3? Because I feel like on the Sunday recap show, we both were in agreement that Texas A&M has a case to be the number 1 team.
I do. Yeah. If I had an AP poll, AP ballot, they would at least be number 2.
Okay.
I'd have to think about because
I would put Ohio State before A&M right now. Actually, I'll say that, but I agree A&M should be number 2.
I do too. But it's because I admit that I take past year's results into account. If Ohio State's the defending champion. They are 9-0. They're beating everybody by like 3 scores since they played Texas. Like, I think they deserve to be number 1. What bothers me about the committee is they act in a way. They say that they don't take things into account that they clearly do. Like they say they throw last year's results out the window, and then you start asking them why Ohio State is number 1, and they start talking about like the continued success and that they haven't lost, and and it's like, well, I thought you didn't take that into account. So they like try to take a subjective thing, which is ranking teams in which most of them don't play against each other. They try to make it objective with these kind of weird parameters that they put out there. And then when you start pointing out the inconsistencies in those parameters, they start talking about how subjective it is. And it's like, well, yes, that is the point. So I think they box themselves in with what they say they take into account instead of just leaving it, open to interpretation and just saying there's 136 teams in this sport. They all don't play each other. We don't have a lot of cross contamination metrics to go across. So we use everything. And sometimes when we're comparing teams, the eye test matters more. Sometimes it's the resume and who they've beaten and who they've lost. Sometimes it's head to head. Sometimes head to head doesn't matter as much. And so I think they talk themselves into circles by trying to make it an exact science when I think we would all benefit from just admitting that it's it's not that at all.
I did think it was kind of funny how Mack Rhoades, the CFP selection chair, which, by the way, the guy that has to go talk and defend the CFP rankings on TV, that's the worst job ever. Like, if I had that job, I would be talking. And sometimes even on a podcast we do, I'm like the Michael Scott meme of I start a sentence and I don't know where it's going until I finished it. Can you imagine doing that on live TV, ESPN, and just realizing you said something that totally contradicts what you just said 2 minutes ago?
I've thought about writing a story on Mack Rhoades with basically the premise of why would you do this? Mm-hmm. But other things are going on with Baylor and Mack Rhoades to where I don't know if that would be the story. I'd have to ask some questions that he wouldn't want to be written about right now, bro.
Yeah, Mack Rhoades just turned my lights off here.
Yeah, he heard it. He heard it. Right.
But what I was going to say before I got sidetracked is I thought it was funny how in defending why Indiana was still number 2 and A&M was number 3, he was like, well, Missouri was on its backup quarterback and didn't acknowledge that Penn State's on its backup quarterback, its interim head coach, and is 3-6.
Right. And they try to act as if like beating a 3-6 Penn State is different than like, say, beating a 3-6 Wisconsin or something like that. And it's like Penn State lost to UCLA and Northwestern.
Yeah, they suck. Like
what they could be has no bearing on what they are. And sure, they have some athletes that are tougher to go against. But again, they've lost to some really bad teams. So this idea that like there's something down in there's something in Penn State that makes this tough. I don't know. I don't buy it.
And what was Missouri before last week? Like 6-3 going into that game?
Yeah. But then, they are on a true freshman backup quarterback. But again, you can only play the teams that are in front of you. And this is going to work out, right? Like Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, Alabama are in the top 4. If things stand the way that they are, Ohio State and Indiana are playing, Texas A&M and Alabama are playing. If Texas A&M wins out and wins the SEC championship, let's say Ohio State does the same and win the Big Ten championship, A&M's clearly jumping jumping Indiana into the 2 spot. So I think the furthest A&M probably falls is into a home playoff game in round 1. Let's say they lose to Texas, losing the SEC championship game, and they're an 11-2 SEC runner-up. I honestly still think that they would be a top 4 seed, but I think the lowest that they go is first round at home matchup, which isn't the worst thing in the world.
All right, let's talk about this week's marquee matchup for Texas college football. It's number 10 Longhorns traveling to Athens to face number 5 Georgia, 6:30 p.m. on ESPN. Georgia favored by 6.5. And, just first off, shout out to the Texas Longhorns for playing their way back into this being a marquee matchup. Like, this season was almost an abject disaster and over by September. But part of me fears we've forgiven Texas too fast, as in we are We thought the offensive line was fixed, putting Cole Hudson at guard and Connor Robertson at center. And we've said, hey, they've got it back on track. These two teams are back to being evenly matched. And I think Georgia might expose them.
It's possible. I don't hate the matchup for Texas, though, here, because Texas's offensive line is the issue. And when you get pressure on Arch Manning, it seems like things break down. And we look at Georgia and we think of Georgia as this team with monsters on their defensive line that are kind of going to get after you and force pressure and negative plays. That is not this Georgia team. The Bulldogs rank last in the SEC in tackles for loss, last in the SEC in sacks. And so I believe that this is a solid matchup for Texas. I'm not sure they're able to run the ball. Georgia's still good against the run because those linebackers are so great. So this to me is an Arch Manning, let's see what you got game. In theory, you're going to have time. The wide receivers are starting to click. Ryan Wingo's making big plays. When you have the ball offensively, I think you have a chance to get some explosive plays and put some points on the Bulldogs. I think on paper, most people would predict this to be a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be the opposite. I think this is going to hit the over and be more of a shootout type game as it unfolds because Georgia can't get much pressure on Texas.
I think my fear for Texas is that's a really good point about Georgia's defensive line not being the same on getting pressure, but the Texas fear for me is also a self-inflicted wound theory of if you don't play a complete game against Georgia, you're going to lose. And I'm just looking back at Texas' offense in the last 5 games, lost to Florida, even though the offense played okay. They didn't play a complete game, though. That was more of a defensive disaster. They played one good half against Oklahoma. They had the worst performance of the Sark era against Kentucky. They played a good quarter against Mississippi State, and then they played 3 good quarters against Vanderbilt. The fourth quarter, Vanderbilt almost came back. I just haven't seen this team play a complete game outside of the Sam Houston game, which doesn't count.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that Texas was never as bad as we thought they were after the end of non-conference to drop completely out of the rankings after they lost to Florida. But I'm not sure that they're a top 10 team. So I'm not sure Oklahoma is as good as everyone says that they are either. And so I think it might be a house of cards, and maybe this is where it falls down for Texas. But the good news for the Longhorns, this strikes me a lot as like the bizarro world matchup of last year. Remember, Georgia had lost to Alabama, back against the wall. If they lose that game at Texas, they're pretty much out of the SEC race. Who knows what they're going to be in the college football playoff? And they come to Austin and they whip up on Texas. Arch Manning plays in the second half, and Quinn Ewers gets benched, and that doesn't go all that well. It's reversed here. Like Georgia can lose this game. Texas cannot. And so I wonder how much the human nature of it plays a fact. And also, Georgia has won 2 straight against Texas last year. And so there's a lot of players on the Texas roster that's going to be motivated for this. This is a big, big game for Texas. A couple of years ago, this would be a monstrous game for both teams because neither one could lose. But now I think Georgia has some wiggle room to where if they lose this game, they're still fine. I don't know if I'm on the Gunnar Stockton bandwagon yet, but he's been playing excellently the last month or so. And so I do think the Texas defense is up against something, but Michael Taft, in theory, coming back, Jelani McDonald getting healthier. If the Texas secondary is healthier, I like the Texas defense here. I think I like the matchups. This is going to sound crazy. I think I like Texas's offense against Georgia's defense better than I like Georgia's offense against Texas's defense. It's just playing in Athens that I think I still lean Georgia.
The bye came at the perfect time for Texas, getting those secondary guys back. The Gunnar Stockton piece is interesting because him and Arch Manning are number 1 and number 2 in the SEC for pass attempts behind the line of scrimmage. So both are starting to come into their own, but I think the offensive coordinators have schemed it to where they're both younger quarterbacks getting comfortable in this game. So it's going to be a lot about open field tackling. And who do you trust more, Georgia defense or Texas defense? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. It's November 12th, and I'm not sure how much we know about either of these teams in terms of how good they are. This weekend is going to tell us a lot about these. Same with Oklahoma and Alabama when they play each other. So a big game for Texas, one of the bigger games, bigger regular season games that the Longhorns have played in a while. But historically, at least under Sark the last couple of years, they've been good on the road in these big time games. They go to Alabama and they win. They go to Michigan and win. They go to Ohio State and have the ball down 7 at the 50-yard line with 2 minutes left to go, despite playing horrendously on offense with a first-time starter. And so I don't think the moment's going to be too big. I don't think the atmosphere is going to be too large. It's just a matter of, is the offense actually better? Has the Texas offense improved, or has it been a function of who they played against? We will find out Saturday.
Could this moment be too big for Arch Manning, though, personally? I don't think it's too big for the program in general, but for Arch Manning, this is the biggest game since Ohio State, where he kind of came out and laid an egg. And I know he has laid multiple eggs this year, but the past couple weeks, he's back at home. The Vanderbilt game looked really good. I know he's throwing a lot of passes behind the line of scrimmage, but it feels like we have come around on Arch Manning. Like, I see tweets about, look at his numbers compared to Colt McCoy in the first 7 starts and Vince Young and Sam Ehlinger in the first 7 starts, and they're actually better. This could be, does he turn back into a pumpkin and everyone gets back off the Arch bandwagon?
His performance in the Red River gives me confidence, because that's a big game where a lot of young quarterbacks kind of go to die, right? Mm-hmm. So that I don't think Georgia's defense is better than Oklahoma's, and Texas looked okay in times, especially in the second half against the Sooners. The Sooners have like 20 more tackles for loss than anybody else in the SEC, right? So they're going to play a lesser defensive line. I think that's an advantage for Texas because, again, the soft spot is the interior of that offense line, although it's gotten better with Robertson and Hudson kind of in there together at center and left guard. I think maybe the overreaction with Texas this year, both directions, is completely correlated with the overreaction to Arch Manning. He was probably, and I'm just as guilty as this. You can look inside of our magazine, and I have him first team all time Texas. So I'm not shitting on anybody here. I think we overreacted going into the season of how great he was going to be. Then we overreacted through the first 4 or 5 games of how bad he was going to be. And now maybe we've settled in at the right spot in which he is good. Not great, not awful, just a good quarterback that if the stuff around him is working, if Wingo makes some big plays, if Emmett Mosley has some big plays, the running backs can kind of get it going, the offensive line plays better. Arch Manning doesn't have to be Colt McCoy. He doesn't have to be Vince Young. If he can just be a Sam Ehlinger type, I think Texas has a chance to go into Georgia and win this football game. Not a great chance. I mean, they're 6.5-point favorites for a reason, or underdogs for a reason. But I do think they have a chance to go in Athens and beat this football team. And that's all you would have wanted a month ago if you were Texas.
In your defense and we don't need to rehash too much the Arch Manning preseason expectations, but I think there was almost an Arch Manning bubble a bit in the preseason where you felt, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you're the one who made the pick. I feel like you couldn't have not put him there, or you would have come across as a hater. Because I remember when we had Ari Wasserman on the show, and he was kind of combating internet trolls who said, why do you have Arch Manning ranked so high on your QB power rankings? And he said, he is 6'4", 215. He is a Manning. He is with a QB guru and Steve Sarkisian with an awesome offense. Everything about this guy says he's going to be hyped up and an awesome player. And honestly, it's being a hater to leave him off your QB power rankings because he is a Manning and you think the hype's gotten too high.
In retrospect, it would have been very easy to put like Sawyer Robertson, Josh Hoover in there, or Sawyer Robertson, Kevin Jennings in there, like guys you knew, like were known commodities. It was what I was fearful of was the ceiling. How dumb do you look if you leave off the number 1 NFL draft pick from your all Texas team? That was what I was worried about. And you look at all those projections, and there's former quarterbacks in the NFL and guys who I respect that do a lot of NFL ranking stuff that had Arch Manning as like the top player in college football going into And so if he comes into the season and throws for 3,500 yards and gets to the Heisman finalists, and I left him off because of Josh Hoover, I think that would have looked equally as bad. And so, that's just kind of the hard part about projecting. A lot of the times I lean on past production, and this time I just didn't. And, it has not aged well. And, that's okay. That's how that kind of goes.
It happens. And if you're going to be wrong, being wrong about Arch Manning's ceiling I'd make that bet 10 times out of 10, because like Ari said, everything lined up perfectly. And it was honestly weird how the first part of the season went. He has a chance to fully rectify it against Georgia, so we'll be watching for that. Let's talk about Sawyer Robertson and the Baylor Bears. They host number 13 Utah. 6 p.m. on ESPN2. Utah favored by 8.5. Man, I think this is a bad matchup for Baylor. I just have major concerns about Baylor's rush defense. I mean, who doesn't? But against Wayshawn Parker and Devon Dampier, Utah's third in the country with 267 rushing yards a game. And then Utah's defense is allowing 156 passing yards per game. They're sixth in the nation. So what Baylor does horribly on defense, Utah's the best at. And what Baylor does well on offense, Utah is the best at stopping.
Yeah, a bad matchup for Baylor. To kind of prove your point here, CFB Grass has this projected at 38-19. So Parker and those guys definitely believe that Utah is going to win this game, win it outright, cover. Yeah, I think you nailed it. Utah is going to try to be physical, going to try to run the ball and just kind of wear down the Baylor defense, and it doesn't take much to do that. The Bears are coming off a bye week, so you get healthier. You have an extra week to watch film. I do think Dave Aranda at his core is still a really good play caller and a schemer. I'm just not sure they have the personnel to hold up defensively. They're going to need to create some turnovers. They're going to need to get something out of special teams, and they're going to need Sawyer Robertson in this offense to put up 35 points. Like, you're not going to win unless you have put up 30 to 40 points and you just hope the defense steals a possession or two.
And they're going to need Michael Trigg, the tight end, to ball out. I mean, he is on the Mackey Award watch list. He has now broken the Baylor receiving record by a tight end with 1,002 yards on this year, but the season subplot is getting crazy for him. Like it's like that SpongeBob meme of in the dungeon. Maybe it's not that bad, but his subplot is getting wild with the Mack Rhoades investigation. We didn't talk about it last week. Baylor's on a bye. We need to bring it up because it's a big conversation in Waco. Mack Rhoades, the AD, he's being investigated by the school for a altercation on the sideline he had with Michael Trigg. And Dave Aranda's asked about it, and he said, that's an HR deal. It's above my pay grade. And my response to that is, I understand he can't comment on it even if he wanted to. But is it above your pay grade, Dave Aranda? You have to be talking to Michael Trigg about this and the entire team about this to keep this locker room together and eliminate this distraction. This can't just be going completely unsaid in the Baylor locker room right now.
What I disliked about the phrase of above my pay grade is he gets paid more than Matt. Dave,
actually not above your pay grade at all by the letter of the law.
Dave Aranda is probably the highest paid employee of Baylor University. I would imagine that be true. Maybe Scott Drew, I would imagine it's got to be Dave Aranda, right? So definitely not above his pay grade. I think it's just a sign of kind of a culture decaying. And it's just a sign of just kind of this doesn't happen if the record is if you're 7-2. The frustrations aren't this high. The offensive line coach gets dismissed, and there's some rumblings about some altercations in the locker room with that, and now this and Trigg, and I just think it's a sign of a program that's struggling, and there's probably frustration in that building. I get why you don't go in front of the media and start talking about it, because you don't want to put anything on record. But you're absolutely right. It's definitely something the locker room is talking about, some of the coaching staffs are talking about, and maybe it's something that brings this group together. We've seen Baylor on the edge of disaster before. Most notably 2-4 going into Tech last year. They win that game and they run it off. Maybe Baylor is capable of kind of circling the wagons and closing out here. But I do think it would take beating Utah and closing out with, winning out basically to save Aranda's job. It feels kind of like I think the buyout goes out down December 1st. And that's, if he's got a job December 2nd, he's probably keeping it. And so this Utah game is big. You can feather in your cap this thing and trying to get it on the tracks. But I am not optimistic that is what is going to happen.
Them beating Utah would be the funniest thing ever, honestly. Like, after us sticking a fork in the Dave Aranda era saying, whether it happens this year or next year, it's over. Him beating number 13 Utah at home would be pretty hysterical.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing saying Baylor can't win out. They go at Arizona, which is a solid team, not a great team, and then they're at home against Houston, which is another solid team, but not a great team. And so there's nothing that says Baylor can't win out, get to 8-4, and then do you really pay that buyout in this coaching cycle to fire a guy who went 8-4? Probably not. And so this one would be a very big one for Aranda. They don't want to pay that buyout. They don't want to get into this coaching cycle. They want any reason to keep them and to save that money and to use it on their roster. Being a Utah team is one of those kind of signal points that you could point to and say, yeah, we're going to keep this thing rolling. So a big game. But I just, like you said, to start it off, it just is a bad matchup. Like Utah is very physical along the lines of scrimmage, a really good offensive line. They have a quarterback that can scramble, and that has murdered Baylor this year. Like just go back to week 1 in the Auburn game. Running quarterbacks have crushed the Bears. And so I don't have a ton of faith that Baylor's able to pull it off, but don't be surprised if the word coming out of Baylor, if they do, is some rumblings that Aranda is kind of coaching for his job and could still stick around, because there's a reason they hadn't pulled the trigger yet.
Yeah, it's such an interesting situation down there in Waco. I feel like we've been, again, having this conversation about Aranda for 2 years now. And sure, we'll keep having it. I don't know. I've sworn off talking about the existential Dave Aranda crisis, and it just keeps coming back. It's like the fly in your house that's buzzing around. You can't get it away no matter how much you swat at it.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Let's go to Baylor's rival TCU. They travel to BYU, 9:15 on ESPN. Some late night action. Cougars are favored by 4.5. I don't like this spot at all for TCU after BYU got punked by Texas Tech. And because BYU still controls their own destiny, but they have to win each of their last 3 games to go to the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I think the TCU thing is relatively simple. They are +9 turnover margin when they win. They are -6 when they lose. And then, rushing wise, when they're doing in losses, they are averaging 65 yards a game, and wins they are averaging 151.67. And if BYU does anything well, it is stop the run and force turnovers. And so on paper, a bad matchup, specifically on the road for the Horned Frogs. I think the only thing that makes this a okay matchup for TCU is that BYU is coming off that loss, and maybe that exposed some things and gave the Horned Frogs something that they can work with on film. But Tech probably should have won that game even more. But BYU's red zone defense was pretty good. Just all the stuff BYU does well are all the things that TCU typically struggles against. So I'm with you. I think this is a bad matchup for the Horned Frogs, but it's such an up and down team that it's in there that TCU could go win this. Like they have some playmakers that could be difference makers, that can be more athletic than a lot of the BYU skill position guys. Can they get pressure on the BYU quarterback in the way Tech did? Probably not. But if they can get some and get BYU behind the sticks, that's going to be important. And the run defense for TCU is one of the keys to this game.
That's the key point right there of there's 2 ways to look at this. Either BYU is super pissed off after getting punked by Texas Tech and they're angry and it's a bad matchup for TCU, or Texas Tech exposed things on film, like getting pressure on the quarterback that affected his rhythm, that TCU can now mirror. But the question is, like you mentioned, with the pressure on the quarterback, can TCU physically do the things that Texas Tech did to make BYU's life hell?
They can't do it consistently, but I do think they can do it enough to cause some problems. Like TCU is a good football team from a down-to-down standpoint. Like they have good players. You've heard Sonny Dykes. I know the fans don't like. I think you've talked about it, how Sonny will be like, well, if we just eliminate the turnovers, like we can beat anybody. It's like, well, yeah, if you eliminate the thing that you do bad, you could beat anybody. But I do think that's how coaches have to think and how players have to think, that a lot of this is self-inflicted. And if we can just not turn the ball over, if it could just be a wash on the turnover margin, I think the Horned Frogs got a chance, because on paper, they're not much worse than this BYU team. Like they have some skills, position advantages. I love Josh Hoover and what that offense can do. Convoy Barnes is listed as questionable. So that's one to watch there. But this one seems pretty simple to me, as all TCU games are, and until proven otherwise. Can they run the ball? Can they stop the run? Can they avoid turnovers? They need to do 2 of those 3 things at least to pull this upset.
And they got to start fast too, because TCU hasn't scored a touchdown in the first quarter in 4 of the last 5 games. And part of the turnover problem is because Josh Hoover has to play hero ball because they can't run the ball. At what point do we have like a Kendall Briles conversation at offensive coordinator? Because this is now the 3rd season where they haven't been able to run the ball at all. And when he came over from Arkansas, that was what they were awesome at. They were top 10 in the nation in rushing offense.
Yeah, there has not been a physicality at TCU that they need. I think a lot of it stems from the offensive line and just the lack of kind of power. It's more of a finesse offensive line. It's more of a finesse offense kind of built around Josh Hoover and those wide receivers. When TCU went 12-0, it was with a hard-nosed running back with Kendre Miller and a quarterback that could also run the football and be physical in the run game. They had Steve Avila. Coker was there. Like they had real NFL offensive linemen, a real NFL running back, and a quarterback who was tough as nails. And they have gotten away from that formula and kind of become more of the finesse stereotypical air raid team. I don't know if that's more of a Sonny Dykes thing and the way they recruit or a Kendall Briles thing and the way that they're scheming it up and playing it. But it's unquestionable that they have struggled to run the ball. That has put too much on Josh Hoover's plate. That has led to turnovers and has been the undoing of TCU in a lot of these coin flip games in which they should probably win more than they have.
My last note on this one is about the BYU quarterback, Bear Bachmeier, wearing number 47. I saw that when they played Texas Tech. I was like, that's kind of the funniest thing ever. It's because his father, a former Marine officer, picked it for him as a 5-year-old when he was a running back and linebacker because he wanted him to be tough. So he picked him number 47. And when they showed his dad on the screen, I was like, that looks like a man who made his kid wear number 47 because that dude was scary.
I was super impressed with BYU against Texas Tech. Some of that's because of how good I think Texas Tech is, but that kid's going to be good. Just a true freshman. LJ Martin's getting healthier and healthier. So I think BYU rebounds, but it is the type of team that on paper, they're not supremely talented, right? Like Tech shows up to every game with a talent advantage. I think Utah is one of those teams that shows up with a talent advantage. BYU just outplays you, outworks you. And so if you're the Horned Frogs, maybe you can steal this one. It's just going to take you playing in a way in which you haven't proven that you can do on a week in, week out basis.
This might be too deep into the internet for you, but you literally just did the Ryan Russillo meme of like, I actually came away more impressed with BYU. You ever seen that?
No, I don't. Where is Ryan Russillo now?
He's at Barstool now.
Oh, of course he is. Yeah.
Yeah. He was just at the Ringer and now he's on Barstool.
The last thing I remember Ryan Russillo about wasn't he like naked in somebody else's vacation home or something? That's the last time Russillo ever crossed my internet path.
Yeah. I mean, I think he has rebounded now and he's back podcasting. I mean, who among us hasn't ended up?
Right. Yeah. That's not me judging. It happens to the best of us for sure.
Yeah. We've all been there. So shout out Ryan. Not for that, but for getting back on track. All right. Texas A&M, number 3, hosting South Carolina, 11 a.m. on ESPN. The Aggies are favored by 18.5. I don't have much for this game. A&M's way better than South Carolina. They're injured as hell. But Torian York, when asked about how much film he watches, said, let's just say I was watching South Carolina film on the plane ride back from Missouri. So that should terrify South Carolina. And, oh, by the way, Torian York has the biggest neck I've ever seen in my life. Like I saw the Twitter video today. I sent it in our Slack. Like this man's shirts must hate him. Like his neck holes have to be down hanging by his nipples.
He like has to cut like a little slip in it.
It's unbelievable, dude. He's actually the neck meme.
Torian York, Paul Bunyan stories are some of my favorite things from his time at Temple. They used to have to like lay a towel down on like bench presses because he was like sweating so much by the time it started that he was like grossing out his teammates by like how wet he was like leaving equipment and stuff because he would show up like in the dark. Like the coach had to just give him a key. Coach Stewart just had to give him a key to the locker room because he was getting there like 5:30 in the morning, like running stairs and like outside and stuff. It's like, you can just go into the weight room if you want to. So just an absolute psychopath in all the best ways. And they need that, right? Like Texas A&M, what's been fun, Jay and I talked about this last night on the Aggie War Pod. The biggest compliment I can give Texas A&M is that they are boring. They're the 3rd ranked team in the country, and we're talking about them 3rd because we don't even assume. Tell a Texas A&M fan 2 years ago that you're just like not worried about beating South Carolina at home, like not having these trip up games that are stereotypically A&M. Mike Elko's just brought kind of a stability there. And guys like Torian York and Trey Zune, like they have really like bought into that culture. And you don't hear about A&M in press conferences. They're not saying any bulletin material. You don't hear about them off the field like you did a couple of years ago where they're racing through parking garages and smoking pot in the locker room and stuff like that, right? Like they have just become kind of a no-nonsense blue-collar team that is well representative of Texas A&M, of College Station, and of their head coach. Lenora Sellers is really good, and they punished A&M last year. I think they scored like 44 points against the Aggies because they could not tackle Lenora Sellers. That gives Torian York, Mike Elko, and this defense kind of a stick to kind of use this week. They're in uncharted territories. They're playing really well, and I think the biggest compliment I can give Texas A&M is that I have no worries about them showing up and playing well against South Carolina on Saturday.
Yeah, Texas A&M is like the beautiful woman, like all the resources, in Texas, a lot of Booster Club money, great tradition. But they were running around with the rock star, like lead singer of AC/DC, Jimbo Fisher, like being a groupie in the band. It was some wild times, really high highs.
A&M had bad taste in men. I love that.
Yeah. And then they settled down with Mike Elko. He's got a stable job, family man. Now look at where they're going.
That's a good one. That's a really good analogy. Yes, I can wholly agree with all of that.
Okay, number 6, Texas Tech hosts UCF, 2:30 p.m. on Fox. The Red Raiders are favored by 23.5. Same deal with A&M. UCF's way better. I mean, Texas Tech is way better than UCF, excuse me. So this will be a test of Joey McGuire's culture, like we talked about on the Sunday show. Like, it's easy to get up for the BYU game, College game day there. How do you get up for a team you should stomp? So we'll see.
Yeah, Parker at CFB Graphs has UCF's projected points total at 8.5.
Silly.
And so I think what's good news for Texas Tech is the one worry for the Red Raiders is a letdown, right? Because they might be able to lose the Big 12 championship game. They cannot lose a regular season game unless they go and they win the Big 12. And so maybe with tiebreakers, they would still get in that. They'd be able to win out and get the guaranteed auto bid. But in terms of just resume and staying alive to kind of give yourself a mulligan in the Big 12 championship, you need to win this one. And old school Texas Tech teams were always capable of losing these types of games because they were so dependent on their offense scoring 40 points. Defense is one that you can count on more week in, week out. Same with run game. Like, you don't need the rhythm. As the weather gets worse, that should be able to hold up. I just think Texas Tech has built a roster that is so much better than everyone else in the Big 12 that this is about whether Tech can take care of their own yard. And they feel and look, and just being around the program over the last couple of days when I was there in Lubbock, they seem to get that and to know that they're playing for bigger things. And they're all kind of rowing in the right direction, which is astounding for a team that is kind of so mishmashed with portal guys and the NIL. Like, they have a good head on their shoulders, I think, right now in Lubbock. And the only way Tech loses one of these two remaining games is if they just implode. And I think that they're a team that I do not worry so much about that because they can run the ball and they can play defense.
I do like how Joe McGuire has been so honest with his team and given them that mentality you talk about, where they know they're better than you, but they also know they have to prove it, and they know they're not indestructible. It's a scary type of confidence they have, because I always go back to the Georgia teams under Kirby Smart, where it's like Nolan Smith screaming into the camera after they win the Natty, like, y'all thought we were going to go 7-5. And it's like, who thought that? No one thought that. But
I was in that press conference.
Yeah, like Kirby Smart would like convince his teams, or maybe not convince his teams. They would convince themselves that everyone thought they were going to suck. Texas Tech and McGuire, they aren't convincing themselves everyone thinks they're going to suck. They're convincing themselves they have a standard to live up to, which I like.
The other thing to watch here is what Mack Rhodes said in terms of why they are not a top 4 team is because the offense isn't efficient, specifically in the red zone. And I know that was a frustrating part of that BYU win last week. If Texas Tech has the chance to unload the clip on UCF, they absolutely will. Mm-hmm. So if you are a gambler, this is one to maybe take an alt line and to take Texas Tech like minus 28 because like if they have a chance to blow out this UCF team, I believe that they're going to take that opportunity to build some stats, be better in the red zone. And the last time UCF traveled, they got smoked by Baylor. So I think this looks kind of like that, and Texas Tech just dominates this. And the thing I'm watching for is just red zone efficiency. Can you go score touchdowns in the red zone? That is the one. It's kind of like Texas the last couple of years. Like if we're listing stuff for our contenders of like, what are you worried about? For Texas A&M, it's run defense. For Texas Tech, it's red zone offense. And so UCF is a get right game for that, I would imagine. Get into the red zone, score touchdowns, build some belief there, win another one, and keep it rolling.
And for that red zone offense to be more efficient, they got to lean on Cameron Dickey and Jacoby Williams. I saw our friend Rob Bro show tweeted out that Cam Dickey, Jacoby Williams are about to become the first running back tandem to pass 1,000 scrimmage yards each for the first time since 2008 on Texas Tech. And Jacoby Williams is like 20, 30 yards away. So like barring injury, he's going to get that. Just shows how special, how much different this Texas Tech team has been than years past.
Yeah. Tech is 108th in red zone touchdown percentage. That is their thing. Right. And so like, can they, if you can't do it against UCF, that's probably just who you are. And so, maybe this week is kind of a way to shift that.
All right, let's go to the group of 6 ranks. Texas State is at Southern Miss, 2:30 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Southern Miss favored by 6.5. Texas State, just a program with weird vibes right now. The Sun Belt suspended 6 Texas State players following that brawl with Louisiana on Saturday. I think Tymir Jackson, 2 games is the highest. Everyone else is 1 game. So just be weird vibes for a Texas State team that this year was supposed to be a launching point into the Pac-12. And instead it's just like what the hell happened?
Well, what's happened
the defense is what happened.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah. What's happened is they can't stop a runny nose. They are just bad defensively. Like they are still one of the top, I think it's like 3rd in the conference in scoring offense in conference play. And they're 0-5. That it's not, sometimes this isn't rocket science. Like this is just North Texas in 23 and 24, where they are really good on one side of the ball. They are very bad on the other side of the ball. And that causes some cracks on the good side, because we saw last week in the first half against Louisiana, Brad Jackson had some bad plays because he was pressing. And it's because Kenny and them know that they got to score 40 to even have a chance here. I don't know. Southern Miss, I think on paper, a lot of people see Southern Miss and they think, oh, they got to be one of the worst teams in the Sun Belt. Remember, this is like Huff and those guys that came in from a Marshall team that won the Sun Belt last year. They're pretty good. But yeah, they're giving up 40. Texas State, this is giving up 42.6 points in conference play over the last 5 games. Like in 4 other 5 conference games, they have given up 40 points or more. Like it is bad. And now they've lost some guys on that side of the ball to suspension. I don't know how it gets better. I think Kenny is maybe waiting until the end of the season to make a change. I'm almost surprised he hasn't made one right now already at defensive coordinator. Like, I don't think he gets better before that side of the ball gets fixed. And it's going to need a transfer portal window and a new DC to do it. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, Southern Miss is just Marshall's championship team, basically. Braylon Braxton, the QB, shout out, Frisco Independence, former Texas high school football guy. So we'll get to see him in action. Okay, let's go on to North Texas now. They're at UAB, 1 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Mean Green favored by 18.5. UAB is not good. Trent Dilfer is fired. They're on their backup quarterback now I think they benched their starter for poor performance. I should have double checked that. I'm not totally sure. I just know they've flip-flop quarterbacks, and it's not because like their quarterback is so awful, but the team around him does not help.
We were talking about how Texas Tech might want to put one on UCF. This is one where North Texas is playing for resume building. Not only are they playing for resume building for the CFP, a lot of guys, including the head coach, probably playing for some resume building in terms of the next job. And so a lot of times the G5 race is a beauty pageant. And for those who don't know, there is a real scenario here in which South Florida, Tulane, North Texas are like tied atop the American, and there's not many tiebreakers there because North Texas and Tulane didn't play. It would come down to who's ranked higher. Mm-hmm. and blowing teams out, whether it should or shouldn't, helps with that perception. I think North Texas is fighting against Tulane's kind of national profile. And the way to go about undoing that is just blowing the doors off all of these football teams. And it starts this week against UAB. And so if North Texas is up 30 points in the third quarter, don't flip the channel because they're going to keep going. They're trying to get Mestamaker stats. They're trying to get big wins to put on their resume. And so I'm not worried about this game in terms of wins lost for North Texas, but you don't want to be in dogfights against lesser teams because that will be held against you as we start picking, what's the phrase, splitting hairs here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm worried for UAB in this one. Not worried about UNT. Maybe that comes back to bite me, but that's how I feel right now.
They are UAB is 109th in defense success rate against the drawback and 125th against the rush. Like they're going to give up 50 points.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think North Texas defense is gone are the days of them giving up 50 points. They might give up 20 or 30 even, but they're going to get 3 interceptions too.
Right. They're going to steal some possessions, and UAB's only chance to win this game is to win the turnover margin. I'm just not sure they can.
All right. UTSA travels to Charlotte, 11 a.m. on ESPN Plus. UTSA favored by 18.5. Talk about just two opposite ends of the American Athletic Conference spectrum where last week, Jeff Traylor's talking about they're going up against, it couldn't be a worse matchup against USF with the roster they have and things of that nature. Charlotte, ugh.
Here is a good opportunity for UTSA to get that road monkey off their back, right? Like
For real.
If you can't go on the road and beat Charlotte, like blow this thing up. Yeah, a better matchup for UTSA. Obviously, Charlotte's offense not explosive, and that's kind of what undoes the Roadrunners specifically on the road. But can UTSA just play a clean game away from the Alamo Dome? Can they avoid the drop passes? Can they avoid the penalties? Can they avoid the missed tackles? It just feels like everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And Jeff Traylor this week kind of said it's a mental toughness thing, and that's on him for not kind of building that. They do that at home. They do that in practice. For whatever reason on the road, they forget how to play football. You should be able to beat Charlotte even if you're like half concussed, right? Like, even if you don't know what your name is, you should be able to beat Charlotte. I like this as a get-back game. Do you think UTSA makes a bowl game? They need to win 2 out of their next 3. They got at Charlotte, then it's at home against East Carolina, at home against Army. Remember, there is one team that has beaten UTSA at home more than one time in the Jeff Traylor era, and that is Army. And so they got to win 2 out of the next 3. And if they don't win this one, it feels like an impossibility.
I think they do because I don't think Jeff Traylor's ever had a season below 500 in his life. I think you've had that stat going back to Gilmer, going back to Jacksonville, not the team in Florida, going back to that East Texas high school football team, Jacksonville. This man does not go below 500. So I'm just going to go with history and say they figure it out.
I think I'm with you because East Carolina and Army at home, and you just need to split those. And I don't see them losing 2 in a row at home. Army's not as good as they have been in recent memory. And so I think they end up at 6-6, go to a bowl game. And while that won't satisfy the vocal part of the fan base, I think with the way this season has gone, that would be considered a relative win there.
For sure. Okay, let's close it out with Conference USA. UTEP travels to Missouri State, 2 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Mo State favored by 4.5. Missouri State, a first-year FBS program, and I think Missouri State would almost be favored even if they played this game at home in UTEP, which is kind of an indictment on UTEP's program right now.
Yeah, I mean, because usually home is worth 2.5, 3 points at the Sun Bowl with that crowd, probably only worth like a point.
What about the shirtless tarps off guys? I mean, come on, they got to be worth half a point at least.
That's true. The scenery can be distracting. It's a very beautiful place to play a football game. Yeah, I mean, this would be a big one, obviously, for UTEP. You know, Skylar Locklear, since he's been inserted into the starting lineup, has given them a little bit of a spark. They're not losing in horribly embarrassing ways. They lose by 3 points to Jacksonville State. You know, they lose. It didn't look close to Kennesaw, but they were in that one, and they gave up just so many special teams touchdown, a defensive touchdown. You take away those 14 points, and UTEP wins by 1. You know, Liberty, they were in. You know, like they've been in games. Like I do agree with Scotty Walden that this team has gotten better, but I also understand why the fan base at UTEP does not give a rip about that.
For real. And he was talking in his press conference about like they got to learn how to win. And I know that's just like nails on a chalkboard for the fan base, but I do agree with it. And I said the same thing when Sam Houston first came up to the FBS, but like, you know, and I don't have a big football career to draw on here. Like I didn't play college football, but my high school football team, we had a winless season in my junior year. And a lot of those games, like we were bad, but we were better than 0-10, you know, but it just becomes mental almost where you're in games and you get down to the red zone and you're like, we aren't going to pull through because we haven't yet. And so they just need to see one go through the uprights. They need to get a win. I thought it could have been the Sam Houston game, but I think they do need to just learn how there is just some mental aspect of winning these games that isn't always a physical flaw.
Yeah, I think anybody listening who's played golf can kind of understand that concept, right? Where you look down after 8 and you're like 3 over and it's like, man, this is the best I'm playing in my life. Like, this is incredible. I hope I can keep this going. And you just shank Zilla the rest of the time, right? Because you like get into your own head, or you play a golf course in which you struggled in and, you know, you're on the driving range and you're just stroking it. You get onto the first tee and you just launch one into the trees. Like, sports is as much mental as anything, which is why coaches coach and talk, and you know, you hear so many of the cliches and all that kind of stuff. Like, there is room for it in this sport. You were playing with 85 guys, but at the end of the day, UTEP's just not very good. And so they can't afford the mistakes that they make. Like, they turn the ball over too much. They create too many penalties and commit too many penalties late in games. Like, there is some kind of mental block there, to your point, that winning would cure. And they just need to get on a little bit of a streak. And I don't know if they can close well, maybe that kind of boils over into next season. This season is cooked though. And so if you're Walden and company, I guess right now you're trying to see what you got going into next year. But with the transfer portal, who even knows, you know? And so like that, I guess that to me, this is like not exactly a UTEP Missouri State conversation, but to me, that used to be the thing in the G5 is late in the year when the season's kind of cooked, you can start playing the younger guys. You can start looking to see kind of, okay, who can we count on? What spots do we need to figure out through the JUCO or wherever? But now, who even knows how many of these guys are going to be on campus? So how much can you really use these last few weeks to kind of build that momentum? I don't know, maybe a lot, maybe not any at all. But this program would absolutely benefit from going on the road and winning one as an underdog, because that's something they just haven't done so far in the Walden era, is go take one, go steal one that they shouldn't win. They've lost games that they should, or they've lost games that they should win, but they haven't won games that they shouldn't. A lot of times that can be the catalyst for change, and you know, they need to start at some point.
Yeah, I look at like Wandame Davis, who just went for 166 yards for UTEP, had like a career high. And normally, and I'm not saying he's not going to come back next year, but normally that would be like, dude, look at this guy we found for next year. This is going to be sick when he's older. And now there's at least a kernel in the back of your mind, like, oh shit, he might not be gone he might be gone because of this game he just had.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a great point. And again, not much of this isn't exactly like about UTEP, because I don't know what Scotty's thinking here, but that is an interesting point where it's like back in the day, you're 2-7, you got 3 games left. It's like, let's play the young guys, see what they got. Well, maybe now if you're a coach, you're like, let's hide those young guys and not let anybody see what we've got. So just a tough time. It's disappointing, much like Texas State going into the Sun Belt, or going away from the Sun Belt in the Pac-12. You were hoping to have a big season as kind of a springboard into that better and newer conference. UTEP fans have been wanting to be in the Mountain West since I've been aware of what college football is. Like, they have wanted to be in that conference for 20 plus years. They finally are going there. They have this young, exciting coach that was supposed to kind of raise the ceiling, and instead it's just been much of the same. And I just worry that, you know, the fan base is leaning back into being apathetic, and that's the worst place that you can be as a college football program. You'd rather have the highs and the lows, and like go up and down and have reasons to care either way, to be mad or to be excited. It just kind of feels like right now UTEP fan bases are like, tell us when it changes, like wake us up when it's different. And you were hoping at the end of year 2 that it would be upward trajectory. Right now it's steady or even going down.
Yeah, that is an interesting point because we've talked a lot about UTSA fans this year, and are they kind of an unreasonable fan base sometimes? It's like
Yes.
I would much rather have UTSA's fans than I would have UTEP's fans right now, because UTEP's fans are, oh boy, we suck again, and UTSA's fans are like, this is unacceptable. Why are we sucking right now?
Right. UTSA fans base is spoiled.
Yes.
UTEP's fan base is just beaten down. And so, like, why would they get excited about anything? Like, there's nothing that they can, at least UTSA fans can go like, well, within the last couple of years, like, we've proven we can be a double win team. Why can't we be that anymore? Which is unrealistic because you're just not going to do that year in, year out at the G5 level. But UTEP fans are just looking for some sliver of hope. And it was the Scotty Walden hire, and it just hasn't gone to plan so far.
All right, last game on the docket, Sam Houston versus Delaware, 6 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Delaware favored by 9.5. Look, man, Sam Houston didn't go over, and I think that's the success of this season, is not going over. As depressing as that sounds, I think that win was huge.
For sure. Another first-year program in the FBS that's favored against one of our teams that's been there for a couple of years. There is a Sam Houston connection on the Delaware staff. Remember, that's like where Casey Keeler's from and stuff. Ryan Carty, a former offensive coordinator and kind of Keeler protege there, that a lot of Sam Houston fans were hoping that they could go get when Keeler left. And Carty thinks Delaware's a better job, and he might be right. He's also from up there. I think he played there under Keeler as well, so there's a little bit of a tie. Hunter Watson out for Sam Houston, for those who don't know, at quarterback. They did switch quarterbacks. Brendan Locke came in and played a lot there in that win. That was mostly a special teams win. It's not like he wowed the world and locked himself in as the quarterback, no pun intended. And Phil Longo was hesitant to name a starter in his press conference this week. So not sure what will happen quarterback for Sam Houston, but we've seen the Bearcats rally at the end of an 0-8 season that propelled them into next year. And if you're Longo, that's all you can hang your hat on right now, is trying to repeat that trick from 2023.
Yeah, I'm a doubter on if they can rally like that 2023 team did, where they won 3 of their last 4, but it's there. It's there for the taking. So we'll see if they grab it.
Yeah, and after this is Middle Tennessee and FIU, so not the top of the conference by any means. Again, you're at, I mean, home's the wrong word because you're not playing in Huntsville. But if you can manage to steal this one, and you're on a 2-game winning streak, and now you're playing against teams that are even with you down the stretch, like maybe you can go build that momentum. And we can be pessimistic about it, but if you're in that locker room, if you're Longo, that's what you got to lean into here.
For sure. That's going to wrap it up for the Week 12 preview. Craven, any closing thoughts before we go enjoy this slate we have?
Yeah, I do have a closing thought. It feels like the season has flown by and we are in Week 12, and there's this feeling of like, wow, the season's almost over. And then you think about how long college football seasons are now today. I have a stat for you, Carter, before we get out of here. It has been 74 days since Texas A&M started their football season. If they were to play in the national championship, that is 69 days from now.
That's crazy.
So we are basically just in the middle of what is now a marathon college football season. Not for everybody, but for guys like us that cover it on a week in, week out basis. We are not in the senioritis stage of this season yet. There is still a long ways to go. And in the state of Texas, we could have as many as 5 teams in the playoff. Like, I know that's unlikely, but there are 5 teams still very much alive to make the college football playoff. So it could be a long season for Texas college football fans.
And that's where the playoff does help, because there will be games for all those 69 days. It used to be in the BCS era, those teams, they take a month off in between their conference championship and national championship and bowl season and things like that. So,
and we don't talk a lot of non-FBS here, but playoffs are starting at the JUCO level. Tyler Junior College plays Cisco this week. Trinity Valley plays, I think, Northeastern Oklahoma A&M, if I got that correctly, because JUCO is kind of weird. And here's one for you. I think JUCO might have the solution of how playoffs run.
Give it to me.
So they play their conference schedule, and then they play a 4-team kind of conference tournament. And everybody does that. And then the selection committee takes the best 4 teams that win those tournaments. So not everybody that wins the tournaments get in, because there's some conferences that don't have the top end talent, or a team like Tyler gets upset or whatever. But with FBS conferences getting so big, we talked about how A&M hasn't played any of the other top 6 teams in the conference, and they won't until they play Texas at the end of the year. We don't know who's good anymore. You can't even use their conference schedule, and maybe going to 9 will help that because they'll play more and more games. I think we see that in the Big 12 that you have a little bit better of an understanding, but Cincinnati hasn't played Tech, right? You just don't get as many of the games. And so if the conferences are going to be so big and you're not going to be able to play a lot of cross-conference games, maybe we lower the amount of teams in the actual playoffs, but we build a kind of playoff system within. Like if the SEC had, they have 16 teams, I think, if I'm correct.
Yeah, 16.
Split it into
18.
Split it into 4 pods, and then have the champions of those 4 pods play kind of a conference tournament at the end of the year. And the winners of those, you get to pick 4 of those or 5 of those, 6 of those teams, whatever. And then you have a playoff there. Everybody talks about NIL and the transfer portal and why ref share is ruining the sport. The thing that has ruined the sport is the size of these conferences.
And doesn't that solve the Tony Petitti Big Ten commissioner deal where he wants a play-in, like the NBA play-in, for more revenue from big televised games? He would love that, I feel like. I think
I've talked myself into this being my column for next week, that if the FBS wants to fix their playoff system, look at the JUCO level. Because I do think JUCO's got it figured out in that way. And it's because they want to less the travel, right? Like they don't want Tyler going and playing against like some California JUCO and then the next week having to go to Kansas or whatever. It's like, keep it as local and regional as possible. And then we'll take those best teams from those regions and have a smaller tournament after we have, 12 games of data. I think the FBS could learn a lot from that.
For sure. So keep an eye out for Craven's column next week on the JUCO playoffs, and also keep an eye out for our Sunday recap show. We'll have you covered after Week 12 in college football, talking Texas, Georgia, talking TCU, BYU, Baylor, Utah. A lot of big games this week. So for senior writer Mike Craven, I am Carter Yates signing off for the Dave Campbell's College Football Podcast.